2, 1, action. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Transnational Table, or the TTT. For today's podcast episode, we're going to dive into a topic that sits at the intersection of race, identity, and media representation. Our focus today is on Kat Graham's experiences as a Black actress in The Vampire Diaries, a show that many of us know and love, but may not have fully considered from this perspective. I'm Imtishal, and I'm here with my co-hosts,
Sameela,
Simran,
and Avneet.
And together we'll be unpacking Graham's experiences on set and how her Blackness shaped her journey, what her story reveals about the broader issues that Black actors face in predominantly white spaces. So we're just going to be starting with some background on The Vampire Diaries. The show was hugely popular and it ran from 2009 to 2017. It wasn't exactly known for its diversity, and Kat Graham, who played Bonnie Bennett, was one of the few Black characters, and her presence on set came with a unique set of challenges. Graham has been open about how her Blackness affected her treatment, both in terms of her character storyline and in the behind-the-scenes dynamics. Avneet, can you tell us a little bit about what she faced?
Yeah, for sure. So Kat Graham's experiences on The Vampire Diaries reflects what a lot of Black actors encounter in Hollywood, where they are often one of the only people of color on set. Graham has talked about instances of feeling isolated and frustrated. For example, she wanted to wear her natural hair for the role, but her requests were shut down by producers who, as she put it, didn't know how to deal with her hair. This is such a clear example of how Blackness was treated as something unfamiliar and even unmanageable. Instead of embracing her natural beauty, they forced her to fit into a mold that aligned with their idea of what was appropriate and acceptable on screen.
This just ties into Dubois' concept of double consciousness, where you view yourself through, of course, your own eyes, but then also the eyes of the other, who can view you as different or inferior. And for Graham, her natural hair was, of course, a part of her identity and her Blackness, but on set, she was forced to view herself through the lens of the white producer. So again, her hair here was something that was unmanageable and unaccommodatable. So this constant negotiation between her true self and the show's producers and what they wanted her to be created a divide and a split in her identity, where her Black identity was always present but never fully accepted.
Right, and I think it's so much more than just hair at this point. It's almost about control, and it speaks to Syed Hussein Aladdis's idea of the captive mind. Even though he originally was talking about how colonized societies kind of adopt the values of their colonizers, we can apply it here as well. In her experience, it reflects a kind of mental captivity where Black identity is reshaped to fit within a predominantly white context. So instead of allowing Graham to present her authentic self, the white producers, enforce an expectation where she would have to adopt to their standards instead.
Yeah.
And so, like, imagine being in her position, constantly being reminded that your Blackness is something that they'd rather control than celebrate. It's a modern form of ideological conditioning where her identity was subtly but persistently and constantly reshaped to fit into a version of herself that wasn't actually truly hers.
Honestly, like, just to put this into perspective, we're just going to be taking a little break and listen to a clip of Kat Graham herself. In the clip, she gets a little emotional discussing her natural hair journey and the pushback that she has faced while trying to keep her hair authentic on the show. In the clip, she's opening up about the challenges and wanting to stay true to her identity while also facing some resistance from a production team. So we'll be playing the clip now.
Have to do. I would keep my hair in cornrows and just, throw on a wig, because most of the jobs that I had done as an actress, they wanted a certain kind of look. 4 months now, and I haven't straightened my hair, so you can see it's really healthy. It's been really therapeutic for me to just wear my hair really, really big. So, let's get it big. Can you hear me? So much fun. An afro pick. I never thought I would even own one. The African afro texture is not something that Hollywood has ever necessarily embraced. So I hope that I one day can play a character that I actually look like. My hairstylist, Rachel Lee, who's amazing, who was actually the first person to really put me on this journey of using my own hair. I just love just having a fro. I don't know. Quarantine has completely changed me. I don't know that I would even have shown this to you guys before. I can do so much with it. I don't straighten it, but what I've been loving to do is condition my hair and keep it conditioned. So these are my favorite oils. And it was almost like she knew I was gonna be on my own. And I've never had to be on my own with my hair. So anyways, I really love this product because this was the product that helped me figure out that my hair will work with me if I don't give up on it. So, sorry guys. So, I love it.
Wow, what a powerful clip. You can really hear the emotion in her voice, and it really underscores the psychological toll of constantly having to defend her blackness in such a public and high-stake environment. This is where Deborah Thompson's The Long Road Home becomes relevant. In her work, Thompson delves into the multifaceted struggles Black individuals face when they enter predominantly white spaces. She argues that while visibility is real and crucial, it's not enough if it comes with limitations and expectations that don't allow Black people to exist fully and authentically. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and The Long Road Home emphasizes that true representation just goes beyond checking a box for diversity. So Thompson critiques these tokenized versions and forms of representations that allow Black individuals to be in the same space as their white counterparts, but not be able to exercise the same amount of agency and autonomy in their representations. So for Kat Graham, being on The Vampire Diaries was a struggle because while she was included in her role, her Blackness was just sanitized and controlled, and overall, this is echoing Thompson's argument about the dangers of superficial representation.
Yeah, exactly. And Thompson also talked about how Black individuals often have to make themselves small or less threatening to society to be accepted in white spaces or amongst white people. And in her case, her character Bonnie was rarely giving the same complex story as the other white cast members, despite being part of the main cast. And it's almost as if the show wanted to benefit off of her Blackness without fully engaging with her complete Black identity. And this is where Christina Sharp's concept of the wake comes into play. So she uses the term to describe the enduring effects of slavery and systemic racism, which continue to restrict Black lives' identities and expressions. But for Graham, being denied her natural hair on set is also a modern manifestation or version of these historical constraints.
Yeah, and honestly, adding on to like Sharp's idea of the wake, it's really resonating here in this topic because it's highlighting how Blackness is often contained within boundaries. And these boundaries weren't just set like 3 months ago, they were set centuries ago.
Yeah.
And even in modern media, we see that Graham's Blackness was kept within those strict limits, and that echoed the boundaries imposed on Black people throughout history, not just now, but it's happened since history began, to be honest. And we know that she was visible, but she was never really free to express herself, and she's kind of still held down under this pressure of like making sure it's not too much, you know?
Yeah, like walking on eggshells almost
around
around white people.
100%.
Yeah.
Not even just white people, honestly. I feel like anyone people that aren't Black.
Anyone who's not Black,
Yeah, and so this all just ties back to materiality, a concept that we'd see in Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. So Rodney discusses how colonial powers exploited African resources but disregarded African humanity, essentially. In the media, Blackness is often treated as a resource that can add more diversity or appeal, but it's not really genuinely ever respected by people. Graham's character added diversity to The Vampire Diaries, but her identity was treated as something to be controlled by the producers rather than celebrated. Her Blackness was there, but it was commodified, and to make the show look more diverse without ever truly respecting her cultural identity.
Yeah. And this commodification leads to what we can call a fear of ambiguity or protophobia. So by denying Graham her natural hair, the producers were avoiding the ambiguity of her Blackness. So they didn't want to engage in an identity that didn't fit in their predefined molds. And there's an underlying xenophobia, you can say, or the fear of the other. So this can be clearly seen in response to the director and producer's response in regards to her natural identity, her hair and her Blackness and everything that pertains to such.
Yeah, and I think it's really clear that what she was facing, what she was going through while being on set or recording the Vampire Diaries, that it was almost an attempt to just limit her identity to what was comfortable for a white audience. Like, they kind of tried to shut that part out. But I think what's really inspiring is that she never really let it get to her and let it stop her. And eventually, to this day, she became an advocate for natural black hair, pushing back against these constraints. And in the readings, this would connect with Malcolm X's idea of resistant consciousness. So instead of accepting the role imposed on her, she chose to do the opposite and advocate for change, not just for herself, but for other black actors as well.
Yeah, and I kind of also, adding on to what you just said, wanted to say that with her speaking out, it's not like she hasn't faced any repercussions of her speaking out.
Yeah.
It's been hard for her to find roles now because she's talked against so many like higher up people, like directors and stuff, and she's talked ill about them, and it's honestly
It's
so
cost her career.
it has cost her, but
Yeah.
it's nice to know that she's not letting that affect the way that she goes about her blackness and how she's treated in society.
I'd say it's really just the resilience, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like knowing that things might not go your way, but you're still pushing through and getting over those barriers that are thrown at you.
And that's how like change starts, right? That's the beginning.
And that's progress for sure.
Yeah, I think it's kind of sad though. It's almost like black people have to give up one thing for another.
Another,
it's like
100%.
it's about money, success, and society and in this world, especially like westernized world. You have to give up your part of your identity, which is your blackness, and it's like
But they shouldn't have to compromise.
they shouldn't have
either
to,
or,
but it's almost like they have to. And I feel like a lot of black people and even people of color, they can probably resonate with this idea that they just kind of have to give up one for the other. You can't have both.
Yeah, you can't win them all for people of color, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Like adding on to that, like we see that her advocacy is powerful, and because she's breaking free from what like we have learned about Syed Hussein, where he talks about mental captivity, by speaking out, she's not only resisting the limitations that are placed on black people, but it's also highlighting the broader need for authentic representation in media. Her journey reminds us that black actors should not have to compromise their identities just to be included, as we were just talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I feel like our conversation at this point, like we can really tie it to Deborah Thompson's The Long Road Home, where true representation shouldn't just be about visibility. It should also be about empowerment. And so Graham's journey shows us that authentic representation is about allowing black individuals to actually bring their selves into these spaces unfiltered or having to compromise, like we said before.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I just think it's really important to note that Kat Graham's story is not just about one actress, and it's about challenging the industry to make spaces for blackness in all of its forms. And again, with our conversation, her resilience it's paved the way for so much representation, even in the realm of color, right? And for aiding that blackness, and for aiding for a space for blackness. So I think that's really just outstanding, and I think from her experience, this can teach us about real diversity, and that this is more than just having character representation on the screen. It goes beyond that, you know, and it's something as her hair, something that I think the overall media can overlook, you know, but that right there is a key factor of blackness, and for her to stand up and put herself in a vulnerable position to make space for blackness in media portrayals, I think is just beautiful. So I mean, it's really just pushing us to understand that this requires, I mean, when you're looking at blackness in the media, it requires allowing those characters to exist fully, right? And not placing any constraint on them.
And I feel like her resiliency is allowing other people to stand up and advocate for themselves,
and knowing that they're not the only ones like in it, like they have other people,
especially with her role. Like, it was a pretty big role.
And so when people see that, I mean, it's like courage and motivation to do better for yourself and for your communities. And I mean, it pushes directors as well to educate themselves.
100%.
Right? So I think it's really important, actually.
Honestly, that was a great way to end off. That concludes our conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this conversation. And now we know that Kat Graham's journey is a powerful reminder that the importance of advocating for spaces where black individuals can be their true selves. Let's keep pushing for these conversations, as they're very important and they need to be talked about, not only in media, but in all aspects of our society. We will see you guys soon. Thank you for joining us at the Transnational Table.
Now we're
we're gonna open up the floor for discussion. That was good.
That's so good.
Wait, can we check if it didn't? This.
No.
Oh, it was okay.
Pray to God. Pray to God.
Please.
Pray to God.
Yeah!